Before Shedeur Sanders said a word, the debate was already boiling. Analysts fumed, fans debated, and Rex Ryan led the charge with ridicule. But as the shouting escalated, Sanders stayed silent, measured, grounded, immovable. That silence became the story. In a league chasing clicks and characters, he declined the spectacle. No press tour, no defensive tweets, no barbs thrown back. And when he finally did speak, it wasn't a clap.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
It was a quiet thunder. My resume will say Pro Bowler. Their resume will say bitter critic. That one line outlasted every segment that tore him down. It wasn't just what Sanders said, it was when and how. His timing cut through the noise with surgical clarity. While the league's rebranding of the Pro Bowl confused old-school pundits, Sanders seemed to understand instinctively, visibility, not volume, wins now. The NFL didn't pick him to reward stats. It picked him to represent what the league is becoming. And by refusing to fight for validation, Sanders let the facts, and the format, speak for him. When Shedeur Sanders was named to the Pro Bowl, the NFL didn't just start a conversation, it lit a cultural fuse. It wasn't the kind of moment that slips by unnoticed, because it struck at the heart of what people think sports recognition is supposed to mean. 7 touchdowns. 10 interceptions. Completion rate under 57%. A subpar QBR. By traditional standards, Shedeur's rookie season with the Cleveland Browns didn't scream elite. In fact, it barely whispered above average. But that's exactly why the reaction to his Pro Bowl selection was so explosive. It wasn't about performance, it was about perception. And it wasn't just that people were shocked by his inclusion, it's that his selection exposed something they weren't ready to admit, that the rules of recognition in professional sports are evolving and fast. And to Rex Ryan. Rex didn't waste time. Within hours he was on camera, red-faced and incredulous, calling the selection embarrassing, a joke, and accusing Sanders of sneaking in through nepotism and hype. To Ryan, Sanders wasn't a Pro Bowler, he was a branding product. A name with no numbers behind it. But here's what Rex Ryan completely missed. Shedeur's selection wasn't a fluke. It was strategic. It was institutional. And it was exactly what the NFL wanted. Because the Pro Bowl isn't what it used to be. It's not a stat sheet coronation. It's a cross-platform, flag football, studio-packaged, engagement-focused media event. The NFL itself made that clear. And in that context, Sanders wasn't an outlier, he was a prototype. Shedeur's selection wasn't about touchdowns, it was about traction. He didn't need to lobby, campaign, or beg for attention. The league chose him. Not because he earned it in a statistical vacuum, but because he fit in a broader ecosystem. One where the value of a player is measured not just in throws but in reach. Not just in yards but in resonance. Not just in completions but in conversation. And let's be real. Who else in that rookie QB class had media value like Shedeur Sanders? Who else could spark a national debate just by showing up on a roster? His presence didn't dilute the event, it amplified it. The Pro Bowl is no longer about recognizing the best, it's about recognizing what drives attention. It's not meritocratic in the traditional sense. It's theatrical. It's programming. And Shedeur was cast for a reason. While the media spun itself into a frenzy, Shedeur's response was pure silence. Composed. Respectful. He didn't take the bait. He thanked the league. Thanked Cleveland. Focused on growth. No chest pounding, no social media flexes, no reactive interviews. And that composure? It changed the tone completely. Then, almost casually, came the private quote that hit harder than any press conference ever could. My resume will say Pro Bowler. Their resume will say bitter critic. That one line sliced through all the punditry. It stripped the conversation of its emotion and reframed it in simple permanence. Because when the cameras turn off, when the shows move on, and when every last debate has been uploaded, clipped, and forgotten, what's left? The record. Sanders understood something many of his critics didn't. That hot takes are temporary but archives are eternal. No matter how many times someone says he didn't deserve it, no one can erase the fact that he was selected. That line next to his name? It's permanent. It doesn't carry an asterisk. It doesn't come with a qualifier. It just says Pro Bowler. That's it. And the more Rex Ryan raged against the reality, the more disconnected he looked. Because the issue was never about whether Shedeur deserved it under old standards. It was that the standards themselves have changed. And that realization, more than Sanders' stats, is what caused the outrage. This is where the split happened. On one side, traditional analysts like Rex, clinging to a version of legitimacy rooted solely in performance. On the other, the league, and an audience that now values cultural capital, narrative visibility, and platform fluency just as much as on-field production. It wasn't Sanders that threatened the old guard. It was what he represented, that the power to define value in sports isn't exclusive to pundits anymore. It's shared now. Shared between leagues, audiences, networks, and yes, algorithms. This is where the Rex Ryan pivot says it all. When he realized the NFL was openly treating the Pro Bowl like an entertainment product, he couldn't argue the selection anymore. So he tried to reframe the whole concept. Suddenly, his outrage shifted from Sanders himself to the meaning of the Pro Bowl. It went from "he doesn't belong" to "this event means nothing." But you don't get to rewrite the rules just because you didn't see the change coming. The truth? The Pro Bowl never had the consistency people like Rex pretended it did. Fan votes have always skewed things. Injury replacements, popularity contests, legacy nods, it's always had holes. This isn't some new disaster. It's just finally being acknowledged for what it is. A marketing tool. A media product optimized for engagement, not purity. And Shedeur didn't rig that. He fit it. He didn't manipulate the system. He didn't game the structure. He simply existed in a way that made him a smart, strategic pick under the NFL's new priorities. And the brilliance of his approach? He didn't argue for his spot. He let the league do that. He let the institution take responsibility, while he focused on remaining composed and grounded. This wasn't passive, it was intentional. He didn't participate in the outrage economy. He denied his critics the one thing they needed to keep the fire going: reaction. And because of that, the conversation turned. Slowly. The chaos settled. And when it did, Shedeur wasn't burned by it, he was elevated through it. Because the real story wasn't his numbers. It wasn't even the Pro Bowl itself. It was how one rookie handled scrutiny, stayed in control, and used institutional trust and public silence to let the truth reveal itself. Shedeur didn't win over his critics with words. He outlasted them with poise. And in doing so, he defined the blueprint for how to survive and thrive in the current media era of professional sports. We're no longer in a world where stats alone tell the full story. We're in a world where performance shares space with presence. Where athletes are also brands. Where moments are as valuable as milestones. And where narrative impact can be as important as physical dominance. That might frustrate some people. It clearly does. But it doesn't make it any less true. And in this world, Shedeur Sanders earned that Pro Bowl slot, not through traditional excellence but through modern resonance. He didn't redefine the system. He just showed us what the system already is. So if you're still holding on to the idea that legitimacy can only come through yardage and passer rating, you might want to catch up. Because while you're debating stats, Shedeur's already part of the archive. Already in the record. Already in the story. And if you're here for more moments like this, where the culture, the media, and the sport collide in the most chaotic, revealing ways, hit the like button. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Shedeur expose the system, or just play it better than anyone expected? And yeah, go ahead and subscribe. Because the future of sports isn't just being played. It's being written. And you'll want to be here when the next chapter hits. What makes this entire situation so much bigger than Shedeur Sanders himself is that it forced the sports world to finally confront something it's been avoiding for a long time. The scoreboard isn't the only scoreboard anymore. In a league as legacy-driven as the NFL, where grit, stats, and earning it the hard way have been sacred pillars, Shedeur's Pro Bowl selection felt like heresy to a certain crowd. That crowd, mostly made up of former players, old-school commentators, and back-in-my-day types, responded with predictable outrage. And leading the charge was Rex Ryan. Rex didn't just disagree with Sanders' selection. He went for the throat. He said it was embarrassing, that it disrespected the game, that Sanders was only there because of his last name and his social media clout. It was a full-on character assault dressed up as sports commentary. But the part Rex failed to grasp, or simply refused to accept, is that Sanders' inclusion wasn't an accident. It was by design. Because this version of the Pro Bowl isn't about crowning statistical gods. It's about producing content that draws attention, that keeps people watching, talking, clicking. The NFL didn't hide this shift. They announced it. They restructured the event into a flag football spectacle with studio segments, player interviews, behind-the-scenes features. Basically, NFL meets influencer culture meets made-for-TV drama. And in that model, Shedeur Sanders is exactly the type of player you select. Not because of a 4,000-yard passing season, but because he is the conversation. Whether you think he belongs or not, you're talking about him. And in 2026, that is value. That's the new currency. It's not just what you do on the field, it's what you represent, how you move culture, how much engagement you bring to a product that depends on relevance to survive. Rex Ryan was reacting to the past. The league was casting for the present. And the best part? Shedeur never asked for any of this. He didn't campaign. He didn't manufacture the moment. The league called and he accepted. That's it. All the noise that followed? It wasn't coming from him. It came from people who felt like their definition of legitimacy had just been ripped out of their hands. The irony, though, is that Sanders didn't even respond, at least not in the way people expected. No dramatic rebuttals. No rants. No clapping back online. He kept it respectful, mature, and centered on gratitude. And that silence? It wasn't weakness. It was power. Because in the middle of a media firestorm, when everyone else was spiraling, Shedeur stayed still. And then quietly delivered the only quote that mattered. My resume will say Pro Bowler. Their resume will say bitter critic. That line was a mirror. It didn't just shut down the noise, it reflected it back at the people making it. It told the truth in a way that didn't need volume. It just needed precision. Because when all is said and done, it's not the pundits' takes that survive. It's the records. And the record now says, Pro Bowler Shedeur Sanders. Not because he gamed the system. Not because he faked it. But because the system redefined what success looks like, and he simply existed within that new framework. And did so without flinching. Meanwhile, his critics stumbled. Rex Ryan went from ranting about how Shedeur didn't belong, to trying to discredit the entire Pro Bowl concept once he realized the league stood by its choice. That pivot, from attacking Sanders to attacking the event itself, wasn't strategic. It was desperate. It was a man trying to hold on to control in a world that no longer follows his rules. And this is the moment so many missed. The backlash wasn't really about Sanders. It was about discomfort. Discomfort with change. With the erosion of old definitions. With the fact that legitimacy in sports is no longer dictated solely by performance metrics. It's now co-authored by storylines, social platforms, and engagement ecosystems. The Shedeur situation became a flashpoint for that reckoning. His numbers weren't extraordinary, but his presence was. His narrative weight was undeniable. And the league isn't just looking at who performs. It's looking at who resonates. That's not a glitch in the system. That is the system now. And Sanders? He's not fighting it. He's flowing with it. Not recklessly. Not exploitatively. But thoughtfully. Strategically. He didn't inflate his role. He didn't demand validation. He let the NFL speak. He let his selection speak. And then he let the people yelling about it yell themselves hoarse while he stayed composed. That kind of self-control, especially from a rookie, isn't normal. It's impressive. Because what Shedeur showed wasn't passivity. It was mastery of timing. Of optics. Of what not to do when the cameras are waiting for a meltdown. And that's what turned this from a moment into a model. Because he didn't just take the Pro Bowl slot, he used it to showcase how a young athlete can handle intense public scrutiny without losing control. He became a case study in emotional intelligence. In professionalism under pressure. In letting the system's decisions speak louder than personal defense. That's a high bar. One that most rookies frankly would fumble. But he didn't. He played the long game. And when the storm passed, he wasn't just still standing, he looked better than the people who tried to tear him down. And that's why this moment will stick. Because it's not really about whether Sanders is the best QB of his class. It's about how he handled a firestorm he didn't light. It's about how he turned scrutiny into stillness. How he let truth and time do the talking. There's a quiet kind of strength in refusing to engage with critics who are playing an old game. And in doing so, Shedeur not only stayed in control, he helped redefine what control even looks like in the modern sports media environment. So while people like Rex Ryan scramble to adjust to the league's new criteria, Sanders has already passed the first major test of his professional career. Not the Pro Bowl. Not the game. The moment. The pressure. The expectation to react. And the decision not to. And that's why when the story of this Pro Bowl season is told, it won't be about his stats. It'll be about what he represented. About the uncomfortable truth that cultural relevance is value. That narrative weight is a metric. That staying composed in chaos is professionalism. He didn't break the system. He showed us what it's evolved into. The fallout from Shedeur Sanders' Pro Bowl selection isn't just a sports story, it's a generational checkpoint. Because what happened here wasn't just about football. It was about the culture clash between two realities, the old one that clings to traditional meritocracy, and the new one that sees performance metrics living side by side with platform presence, storylines, and media fluency. And for a lot of people, especially folks like Rex Ryan, that clash hit a little too close to home. Here was a rookie quarterback who, by every old-school metric, had an underwhelming year. 7 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, a completion rate of 56.6%. Those are not Pro Bowl numbers. Those are rookie figuring-it-out numbers. Numbers that, in the past, wouldn't earn a second look from the league's all-star showcase. So when Shedeur's name showed up on the roster, the sports world didn't just blink, they exploded. Because his inclusion wasn't confusing. It was confrontational. It confronted the unspoken assumption that you only get to walk onto that Pro Bowl field if your stats prove you belong. And in that moment, Shedeur became the face of an uncomfortable truth. The NFL no longer measures value by stats alone. It was ESPN that pulled the curtain back, reframing the Pro Bowl not as a performance honor, but as an engineered entertainment product. Something curated, scripted. A content asset disguised as an accolade. With mic'd-up players, flag football antics, and studio-aired storytelling, the Pro Bowl wasn't about rewarding the best. It was about showcasing the most engaging. Shedeur didn't sneak in. He was cast. And the outrage that followed? It wasn't really about him. It was about the erosion of a belief system, that recognition should be earned the same way it always was. That changing the criteria somehow invalidated the meaning. That a rookie quarterback with a famous last name, a strong online presence, and a modest stat line wasn't just out of place, he was a threat to the purity of the game. But here's the truth, the Pro Bowl was never pure. Not really. It's always had fan voting flaws. Injury replacement loopholes. Popularity contests. Regional biases. It's always had politics, narratives, and marketability baked into the selection process. This moment just forced everyone to admit it. And when they couldn't deny it anymore, the conversation turned on Sanders. That's where Rex Ryan stepped in, loud, pointed, and completely unprepared for the reality he was now shouting into. He didn't just say Sanders shouldn't have made it. He called it embarrassing. He painted it as a joke. He launched into a full-character takedown, accusing Shedeur of riding his father's fame and manipulating his way into a spotlight he hadn't earned. It wasn't just criticism. It was projection. Because Rex wasn't just calling out Sanders, he was trying to defend a version of the league that no longer exists. And Shedeur? He didn't bite. He didn't tweet. He didn't storm onto a podcast. He didn't craft a defensive press tour. He simply acknowledged the honor with gratitude. He shouted out his team. He focused on growth. He honored Cleveland. Then behind the scenes he dropped one line. My resume will say Pro Bowler. Their resume will say bitter critic. That wasn't a rebuttal. It was a reality check. A sharp, surgical observation that while critics come and go, records stay. And that in the end, it doesn't matter how many people yell, it matters what history says. That one quote said everything. Because Sanders didn't chase legitimacy. He didn't demand recognition. The NFL gave it to him. Not for his stats but for his resonance. And when the backlash came he didn't panic. He didn't spiral. He stayed quiet long enough for the league to clarify exactly why he belonged. That's not just professionalism. That's control. He let everyone else flail while he focused on staying grounded. And that strategy paid off. Because as the dust settled, the story stopped being about whether he deserved the nod, and started being about what that nod means. And in that story, Sanders isn't a mistake. He's a milestone. He marks the moment the NFL stopped pretending that media relevance is separate from on-field recognition. He symbolizes a new standard, where storytelling, digital footprint, and polarizing appeal are no longer side effects. They're part of the metric. This is the league operating as media. Not next to it. As it. And Shedeur didn't hijack that system. He walked into it with open eyes. This is what drives his critics mad. Not that he got in. Not that he didn't earn it in the traditional sense. But that he understood the new rules better than they did, and they're the ones paid to analyze the game. While Rex Ryan tried to pull the conversation back to completion percentages, Sanders stayed silent and let the league make its case. And when ESPN laid out the logic, when they said, yes, we're doing this differently now, Rex had nothing left but to backpedal. He shifted the argument. Suddenly it wasn't about Sanders. It was about the integrity of the Pro Bowl. As if redefining the word stripped it of meaning. But that's the thing, words evolve. And the Pro Bowl has evolved. It no longer means best player. It means most valuable presence. Most watchable. Most conversation generating. And like it or not, Sanders is that. He wasn't selected despite the controversy. He was selected because of it. Because the league understands that cultural relevance isn't noise, it's traction. It's what gets people watching a flag football game in February. This whole saga wasn't about stats. It was about scarcity. About the scarcity of attention, of cultural momentum, of relevance in a crowded entertainment landscape. And Shedeur Sanders delivered all of that just by stepping onto the roster. What he did after that, even more telling. Because when most young athletes are dragged across media platforms, poked and prodded by analysts, they react. But Sanders didn't. He knew that reacting would validate the outrage. That silence would starve it. And it did. He turned down the volume without saying a word. And in that space, people began to see the situation for what it was. Not a scandal but a signal. A signal that the gatekeepers no longer hold all the keys. That recognition is no longer about who can yell the loudest or perform the most perfectly, but about who can resonate in the most dimensions. And Shedeur? He's resonating. So if you're still caught up on stats, still measuring value by numbers alone, you're reading the wrong playbook. And if you're still trying to pretend this was just a mistake, the record disagrees. Because it says Pro Bowler. No asterisk. No footnote. Just truth. If you've been following this saga and can feel that something has fundamentally shifted in how sports moments are made, hit the like button. Drop a comment. Was this a fluke or the new formula? And don't forget to subscribe. Because whatever you think of this era, one thing is certain. It's not slowing down. And neither is Shedeur.